You borrow it from a cult! Ugh. Alright, today we need to talk about The Chosen. Specifically, what we know about Season 3 and the trailer. And I want to talk to you about this, and I need to change sort of my position here a little bit, and I want to introduce you to what's going on. So previously, I made a video about should Christians watch The Chosen? And in that video, I just made the argument that it could be helpful. There are some concerns with it, and you should be careful. And in fact, my main concern was, if you're not familiar with Scripture, this is not teaching you Scripture. I don't think it's meant to do that, but it certainly doesn't. And if you're not familiar with Scripture really well, you shouldn't be watching a show that's just going to confuse the truth in your mind. So my recommendation was, if you're a mature believer, you could find this edifying if you choose to. I wouldn't recommend it for new believers because it involves some discernment. So I kind of took a midway position on The Chosen. And there's a couple issues and concerns with The Chosen that have come out. Different teachers and YouTubers have even talked about those issues. I want to work through those issues, and then I need to tell you the biggest issue that is the reason I'm going to say officially I do not support The Chosen, and I would not recommend you watch that. And I'm going to tell you why I would take that strong position now that I was not willing to take earlier. I know some truth about The Chosen that I did not know before, and that has influenced my decision. So let's look at two of the biggest issues with The Chosen people have had. First of all, the shorthand for the first issue is called 2CV. 2CV means Second Commandment Violation. For those of you familiar with the Ten Commandments, the point is God said, make no graven images of me. Now, I think there are a camp of Christians that take this way too far. A graven image in God's time was meant for some specific things. First of all, it was graven. There was a sculpture, an image, a physical thing you could touch of Jesus Christ. And that was kind of the issue, or of God, I guess, but of any type of God. It's forbidden in Christianity to make a graven image of God. Now, obviously, these graven images were authorized by a man, not by God. The goal was to worship the idol, not God. And their attitude was that they were proud while they worshiped their idols, and they could mate it, and there was a control issue because they manipulated God. The whole thing behind idolatrous worship and what was going on, God was setting his people apart from that and saying, look, I don't want any of that. That is not what I'm going for. I don't not want you to make graven images of me. You're not to worship me, not to worship images of me. You need to worship me, and you don't get to control me. You don't get to make me. I'm bigger than that. That was God's point, I believe, with the no graven images thing, which it's forbidden. Don't make a graven image. Which is part of one of my issues with the Catholics. And they always put Jesus on the cross. That is literally a graven image. I don't do pictures of Jesus in my church. When I first came to my church, we had tons of pictures of a white guy that they thought represented Jesus. No, Second Commandment violation. I'm going to call the flag on that one. But what about plays? What about artistic portrayals of Jesus by another human? That is not specifically forbidden by Scripture. And depending on where you fall on whether a normative or regulative principle of worship, regulative meaning if it's not regulated in Scripture, don't do it. Normative meaning if it's not forbidden by Scripture, it's okay. I believe the truth lies in the middle of those things. And I think there is some place for artistic portrayals of Christ in plays or in shows or in movies. I think there's a fine line there. You've got to be very careful. But it's not actually a graven image, and it's certainly not what God was forbidding, I don't believe. But you got to be careful. So The Chosen clearly represents Christ and talks about Christ. And so a lot of people have a pause there. And I would say that is cause for a little concern. Be careful with this. My warning systems go up when we're portraying Christ. Not saying officially it's dead, but I'm going to be really careful. So there's concern number one. It's been there all along. Concern number two, and this one is again, a very conservative person is going to say something like, they are adding to Scripture. Because The Chosen does not take their script directly from one of the Gospels and go right by line, they're actually more of a synopsis of all four Gospels. First of all, they'll take pieces from each of the four perspectives and put it in the story the way they want to do it. And they take artistic license. They will just straight up add things in that weren't in there as part of the representation. Now, a lot of this is educated guesses based on the culture of the times. This happens all the time. And that really is okay, because trying to imagine what was happening and see it with your own eyes and think about that can really help us as we try to worship God and understand what happened. Meditating on the text and then artistic portrayal, there's really, it's a fine line, and we have to be careful there. Adding to Scripture is very specific. When Jesus talked about not adding to Scriptures, when God talked about this, the Pharisees were adding laws to God's law. God had a specific law. They would add to that, supposedly to keep themselves from breaking God's actual law. For instance, if God said, your skirts need to come down to the knee, the Pharisees said they've got to go to the ankle, and you must always keep it at the ankle, else you've completely gone against God. when the truth was God had just said to the knee. A lot of people do this with divorce. People are like, God could never allow divorce. Well, Jesus provided a clause in divorce. He says, in the case of infidelity, this can be a proper course of action. And so even today, people like to set the bar higher than God would, and that's super dangerous. We can't be doing that. We don't take God's law, add to it, and then mandate that on others. That is adding to Scripture or taking away from Scripture, not preaching the whole counsel of God. Some people would argue that because the character that plays Jesus in The Chosen says things that Jesus didn't say in the Bible, they've added to Scriptures. Well, not if you're using this as biblical authority. They're not claiming this is inspired. They're not putting it at the same level of Scripture. They're not giving it any weight of an authority, and they're not mandating it on anyone. So I don't know that I'm going to say it fits the biblical qualification for adding to Scripture, but I will say concern level going up a little bit. We need to be really careful when we're doing things that aren't exactly scriptural, because I'm a sola scriptura guy. I'm going to tell you, Scripture is the authority. We're careful with that. We don't play with that. We don't mess with it. And The Chosen walks that line. But again, I think there are some places where The Chosen could be helpful. The third issue that people have with The Chosen, and this, Dallas Jenkins, the producer, owner, writer, whatever he is, he did a good job talking about this. He employs a lot of Mormons in the shipping and the production aspect of The Chosen, and then the lead guy who plays Jesus on the show is a Catholic. So a lot of people had issues with the Catholic influence and the Mormon influence, and Dallas Jenkins answered that. He talked about how they are not involved in the script writing and the production. They don't deal with the interpretation. He just functions with other Christians. Guess what? There's room for ecumenicanism. We can be nice to each other. We can participate in things on the same tee. I'm no Catholic. I speak out against Catholicism all the time. I don't want people bound in that legalistic system that does not preach Christ crucified and a free salvation. However, when it comes to anti-abortion issues, I'm voting with the Catholics. We're on the same team. So I see room for that. But again, concerns going up. Now we've got 3 concerns to deal with. We've got some concerning issues with the second commandment violations, some concerning ideas with whether or not we're on Scripture, some concerning things with Catholic and Mormon influence, but they jumped off the cliff. They went completely over the top this time. And this is the issue. They have completely bailed on where they should have been. And in the new Season 3 trailer, let me show you what their Jesus says.
Jesus, if you do not renounce your words, we will have no choice but to follow the law of Moses. I am the law of Moses.
Dallas Jenkins is kind of known for saying get used to different, and that's how he dealt with all the hate that was coming back on him from the first things. And people have rightly said, yeah, we'll get used to different, but not a different Jesus. Jesus never said, I am the law of Moses. And for me, when you mess with one of the I am statements of Christ, change it, add to it. Jesus never said, I am the law of Moses. He said he fulfilled the law of Moses. That is incredibly important. I'll put a link to the video at the end of this one, but Stephen Furtick fell into this exact same heresy. This is the same place Stephen Furtick went wrong, not understanding that Jesus fulfilled the law. He didn't break it. He wasn't it. He fulfilled it. And the way God put that is theologically important. It is doctrinally important. There are only a few I am statements in the Bible. I think there's 7, and they're all very important, and they all link to specific prophecies and aspects of Jesus' character. They're not to be toyed with. They're not to be played with. You don't mess with I am. Unfortunately, where you do see Jesus saying, I am the law of Moses, is in the Mormon books. The Mormons teach that Jesus said that. He never said it. It's in their writings, not in the biblical writings. And it would seem that maybe Dallas has let the Mormon influence go a little too far. It's actually come out into the script now, and then that's our issue. And that's just sad. It's really sad. But you cannot mess with the I am statements of God. This is how God reveals himself, how he describes himself. And when you go in there and you change that and you add to that and you say something Jesus didn't say, you borrow it from a cult. You can't do that. I'm sorry. So I would recommend that you do not watch The Chosen. I would stand by my previous video. At the time of that video, with the information that I had, with the amount of The Chosen that had been produced, I thought it could be helpful for Christians, possibly. I was cautiously optimistic about it. Now I would say, don't support that. Do not give them your money. This is bad deal all the way around. You don't mess with the I am statements of Jesus. They've crossed the line. They've gone too far. And I've got to change my position. And there's the truth about The Chosen.